and then no, I'll still get the degree, but I mean, I think, but it's a practical. Go to recording. Stan Caterbone is my guest. Stan, I don't really want to get into some of the legal issues that you're grappling with right now as a pro se litigant, but I do want to talk about the background of what you describe as a revival of, if it ever went away, of the COINTELPRO program, which was run by the FBI in the early 1970s, and it was used to infiltrate various organizations and harass various people who were seen as anti-government, but it probably, and it did overstep itself in terms of getting into people that were viewed as having unpopular opinion. So let's start with that. I mean, even recently I saw a documentary about Native Americans in rock music. Very interesting. And Buffy Sainte-Marie, who was a Native American folk singer in the 1960s and 70s, had, got through Freedom of Information Act, got information which showed that she had been stymied by efforts of the FBI and other organizations to keep her from being too in the public eye. It's kind of like the old-fashioned version of what we're dealing now with, which is shadow banning. I mean, I've been told even that my station on YouTube is shadow banned, in that a couple of people who had subscribed to the station contacted me and said that they had been unsubscribed when they didn't do the unsubscribing. Somehow it just was dropped, and they were wondering why they weren't getting the videos. So, I mean, the growth of my station on YouTube is extremely slow. And I think that I've been told that if this was not shadow banned, my station would be huge. And the same thing on TikTok. So that's the world we're living in right now. That's fine. I'm just glad to be doing what I'm doing. I'm forging forward, and I'm doing this right now on about 12 different streams. And so I guess, Stan, why don't we start with your story of how this came about? I know that you draw heavily in your research from the Nick Beggitz's library. His father was died under very suspicious circumstances. I believe he was a congressman from Alaska. So let's go right to it.
Well, my situation is a little more complicated. I'm a federal whistleblower.
Okay.
Back in 1987, I blew the whistle on a defense contractor who was from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. It was called International Signal Control, or ISC. Mm-hmm. Now, I was a shareholder, and they solicited me to finance some of their operations. I had a meeting with them in June of 1987, and everyone came after me. Now, the problem is that I recorded a lot of public officials. I contacted a lot of federal agencies. Now, the problem is that 4 years later, Ted Koppel and ABC News broke the story that this company, International Signal and Control, or ISC, was a black ops program for the CIA and the NSA.
Okay.
This was May of 1991.
Now, this was done by 60 Minutes, so we're not waving some conspiracy theory.
No, Ted Koppel, ABC News.
Ted Koppel, okay, Ted Koppel, ABC News, mainstream media.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't me saying this or you. This is something that's out there. Okay.
Yes. Now, that summer, he did 3 programs on the subject matter. Now, at the time, in September, Robert Gates was being confirmed for director of the CIA.
Right.
And they tied Robert Gates into International Signal and Control.
Okay.
Now, he did get confirmed, but then in December, ISC was indicted as one of the largest frauds in U.S. history. And essentially what they did was they did a merger in December of 87, right after I blew the whistle, with a company called Ferrani International from England, one of their larger defense contractors. But they found out that ISC was making the cluster bombs for Saddam Hussein. They had the patents. And they used a middleman, Carlos Caterbone from Chile.
Okay.
Defense contractor. So it got busted. They got indicted. And in September of 87, they arrested me on 4 or 5 felonies and 4 misdemeanors for stealing my own files out of my own office at a financial firm, fairly large firm. We were in 5 or 6 different states. I built it. Took me about a year and a half to build it. So anyway, so in March, they dismissed all the charges, the Lancaster County District Attorney's Office. But what happened is, on the board of directors was Bobby Ray Inman.
Oh, okay.
He was former director of the NSA. He was director of Naval Intelligence. And he was the go-to guy for the contracts. So it was a huge scandal. So everybody went after me, the feds, local, state, and federal. But my father was Navy. And he was a victim of MK Ultra.
Okay.
And my brother, who was murdered on Christmas Day of 1984, was part of the same program. He was given LSD in the Air Force.
Okay.
So my situation was triangulated by me blowing the whistle and then people trying to cover up my father and my brother being part of the mind control. So essentially in 2005, I went into litigation, represented myself pro se, and then he hit me with electromagnetic weapons.
All right, now let's go over a couple of things here. First of all, I want to talk about MK Ultra a little bit, and I also want to talk about exactly what it was, Stan, that you were blowing the whistle about. But before we go to that, MK Ultra, there's been a lot written about this. A lot of the information about that operation, which was set up by the CIA and the national security apparatus shortly after World War II, was revealed during the Church Committee hearings in the late 1970s. And we were told that most of that was stopped at that point. And this was an operation which worked and coincided with intelligence operations in several other countries, including Great Britain with the MI5 and Canada, that was engaging in experiments of mind control. I don't think that's any question about that. That's history. We know about the case of Olson, who they gave a tab of LSD to without his knowing it, and he jumped out the window. There's been a lawsuit about that. I think there was actually a movie made about that. And but it was much more extensive than that. It goes all the way up to the 1960s when psychiatrists such as Jolyon West were releasing LSD in the streets in Los Angeles, and you have Ram Dass and Timothy Leary at Harvard involved in the CIA element of this, popularizing psychedelic drugs. Aldous Huxley, who committed suicide on the day that Kennedy was assassinated while he was on a psychedelic drug, filming the whole thing. The only reason it didn't get coverage is because of the assassination. And you've got a lot of other strange things going on with people were being tampered with. You had experiments that were extremely ghoulish. I mean, it's a really interesting subject. And you're telling me that your brother and father were involved in MK Ultra. So let's before we get into what you were blowing the whistle about, talk a little bit about that.
Well, my father was part of I guess he could have been chipped. He suffered from synthetic telepathy. And what they did was they threw him in psychiatric institutions and gave him electroshock therapy and brainwashed him. Now, my father owned a dry cleaning plant. Him and my mother, we had 6 children. I had 5 brothers.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I have passports of his where he was traveling over in the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there's a gentleman called Dr. Richard Greer who's into ET, researches ET.
Okay.
So I got a hold of Dr. Greer, and his personal assistant wrote to me. I gave her my father's documents. My father documented everything. He has audio tapes, photos, documents. Anyway, they said he was a covert courier. And what they would do is they'd hypnotize these guys, send them overseas, and they'd deliver messages to other spies. Now, if they got caught, they were hypnotized, so they could never be affiliated with anyone, really. Now, my father should have been traveling over the Middle East, and I have his 2 passports in safety deposit boxes. He was in Hong Kong, Lisbon, all over there. And we were told that he had a mental break and he was suffering from a psychotic break and he was chasing religious artifacts. That's what we were told as children. I was like 5 or 6 years old.
Okay.
But the truth be known, he was part of MK Ultra.
Right.
Now, my brother
go
was
ahead.
given LSD in the Air Force. He told me that before he died. He was murdered in Santa Barbara on Christmas Day of 1984.
Mm-hmm.
It was a phony suicide.
He was suicided, in other words.
They probably smothered him with a pillow.
Okay.
What happened was my friend who was at my house partying that night is a mortician. He's one of the biggest funeral directors here in Lancaster County. So I called him up to bring the body back. And when the body came back, he called me up right away. There were no literature marks on his neck, not one mark on his neck. So he couldn't have died by hanging, which is what the investigation said.
So he, like your father, maybe he had either served his purpose or he was about to blow the lid on the whole thing. And
well, he was making rumpus. He was under conservatorship, just like Britney Spears is out there.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And they were holding half of his Social Security. He was only getting maybe 150, 175 a month. But he was living on the streets of Santa Barbara or in transition houses most of the times. So he got a public defender, found out that they were withholding half of his Social Security, and he was calling us up, family, asking us for money, and we were being told he was squandering his money.
Uh-huh.
Now, he was thrown out of Lancaster County, made to leave in 1976.
Why did they have it in for him? I mean, were they afraid that he was going to blow the whistle on the program or what?
I don't know. If you look, I have his documentation. I flew out. I was certified by the NFL as a contract advisor the following March of '85. And I've been going into Santa Barbara County Courthouse and talking to the county people ever since. And the documents I have from public defenders is he was raising some hell about the guardianship, about the money they were holding. And he wanted to go to college again. He was going to Millersville University before he enlisted because of the draft. So he got a dishonorable discharge.
I years ago, I interviewed the late Jim Keith. I don't know if you know who he is, the author of Black Helicopters Over America and a couple of other really interesting books. He actually died under mysterious circumstances. Let's just put it that way. I mean, in a hospital, but he was not in poor health, and there were things that happened. And he wrote extensively in a very well documented way about MK Ultra and the development of mind controlled people who would have basically they could be manipulated in such a way that they would carry out various things, including assassinations. He links it to the assassination of Robert Kennedy. I mean, that's a big subject.
I filed an amicus for Sirhan Sirhan.
Yeah, well, Sirhan has said this after on many interviews that he had no idea what he was doing at the time, and that there were all these weird things going on before that with this woman in the red dress, and there was all these triggers.
Polka dot dress, yes.
Yeah, I mean, there was all these weird, this stuff. I mean, it's kind of such a creepy subject.
2 years ago, Robert Kennedy Jr. came out and said half the Kennedy family don't believe that he was the actual killer.
Oh yeah, well, JFK Jr. has been a real whistleblower and a real truth teller on all this stuff. So, I think that, I'm
Well,
keeping.
can I say one more thing, Charles,
Yeah, please.
before I forget? Here's the thing. My brother Sammy died Christmas Day of 1984 in Santa Barbara, California. My youngest brother died in Kill Devil Hills, North Carolina in 1996 from a suspicious suicide. And my father was murdered up in New York City, where he was living for a year and a half, in 2001. So I've got 3 family members. I stay put. I don't leave Lancaster County.
Yeah, all of these suspicious suicides, gives you the creeps.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say, Stan, that while you're sitting here talking to me right now, that you're of sound mind and body, you're not suicidal, and God forbid something happens, it's not suicide.
No, they go for the mental health right away. They went after that for me in 1987. I was producing the first digital movie with Tony Bon Jovi in Power Station Studios in New York in 1987.
Oh, okay.
Now Tony's one of the leading recording studios in the world back then.
Yeah.
And me and Tony were working on the movie. We had transcripts. We had everything going. We had a film producer from Hollywood, California. Well, I have documentation of that, and I had an airplane at the time. I was so busy. I had a twin turboprop, Navajo Chieftain. Well, they repossessed my plane with all my files in it because I had an office in Stone Harbor. And I mean, it just gets deep state as far as what they did. So what they did was they said that I was making things up about the movie, 302'd me, threw me in psych wards. It never lasts. I get out in 6 hours or a couple days or whatever. But still, it went on the record. And that's still
Right.
with me today. They still use it today.
Well,
I've been institutionalized probably 8 times for no reason, just because they can.
because now you can't get a firearm, you can't do certain functions. This is the tool of the deep state. I mean, always has been. I'm not against psychology and psychotherapy. That's fine. But there is an aspect to it, especially when you get into the medical side with the psychiatry, where it is basically the science of mind control.
Well, they help
Science
build
of
the
public
programs,
manipulation.
psychiatrists.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to talk
and
over
they
you.
study on a mass level how to manipulate the masses. I mean, and I think that they use it as a tool against the enemies. You say the deep state. Well, I mean, didn't they spend a whole 4 years trying to have President Trump removed from office under the guise that of Article 24 of the Constitution, which was that he was not mentally fit? This is what they do to people who disagree with the deep state. They basically say, don't listen to this person. They're mentally ill. They're not competent. And that's expected. Even now they're starting up. I mean, you have this congresswoman. She wants to establish a truth commission in the Congress so that they can start to develop a single narrative for the whole country. And basically anybody who doesn't agree is going to be deemed as mentally ill. They have a gun control bill before Congress right now, which says that you have to pass a mental test in order to purchase a gun. Guess what that means? In other words, if you're a Trump supporter, you don't get to get a gun. That's what that means. It's politics.
I have a pending amicus in the Nicholas Cruz case, and the judge won't rule right now before Judge Scheer. Now, Nicholas Cruz, I go through information and research when I suspect there might be someone that is targeted. And Nicholas Cruz is one. Steven Santiago, the Fort Lauderdale shooter, is another one. Aaron Alexis. All these guys have the same traits. They were all military trained. They were all passed through the system. And Nicholas Cruz, if you look at his first interview, they have it out on YouTube. I have it linked on a lot of my sites. If you look at that first interview where he discusses the voices, that is synthetic telepathy. There's no doubt about.
So he was hearing voices in his head.
Voices told him to kill.
And, the same thing was, as I said, we talked about Sirhan. I mean, the same, when you have situations like this, where there is somebody committing a mass murder for no reason that's obvious, and it's, it's something that obviously has an element of premeditation, you would think that our government, but certainly our establishment, would look upon it as they would look upon any crime. They would do some investigation and some research. I mean, when an airplane crashes, the FAA looks at the crash They try to figure out what went wrong. Was it human error? Was it design error? Was it, stress? What happened? And then they write a report and they try to make improvements as a result. And the same thing should apply to all of these school shooters, all of these mass murderers, the guy over in, in Las Vegas. And I think that there are certain patterns, as you say, that emerge. And one of them is, and again, I'm not here to say don't do this, but I think it's safe to say that all of them were on some kind of a psychotropic drug. And I'm not saying that there isn't a place for that if it's properly prescribed and if someone is under medical observation. I'm not suggesting that. I'm not here to climb that. I'm not a pharmacist. But the fact is that you have to look at the fine print in those things. I mean, it says in tiny print, it says may result in suicide or homicide.
Well, here's the problem. Here's the problem, Charles.
Yeah.
Is that they're using satellites now for these technologies, these weapons. So you can't trace the source really, because Iraq has systems, China has systems, Russia was bombarding our embassy in the 50s with microwaves. See, they're using microwaves.
Oh, yeah. Didn't that happen also recently, right after, I think,
China and our embassy in Cuba.
And that's right. The embassy in Cuba was bombarded with microwaves, and people at the embassy were getting sick, and they were getting headaches, and they were getting migraines, and it was proven. I think the same thing happened with the U.S. embassy in Moscow.
Yeah, I mean, the weapons are brutal. Now they can, they can implant dreams, they can implant voices, they can implant pain anywhere they want. They can stop your heart at the drop of a hat if they wanted to. They're lethal weapons.
Yes.
But now they're included. What happened was the church hearings settled down the CIA. So what they did was they took all those programs and shifted them over to DOD, DARPA, Navy intelligence, and things like that. That's essentially what happened.
Okay.
They started them out.
In other words, they didn't miss a beat. They just shifted over to another bureaucracy.
Yeah, exactly right.
Michael Glennon is a professor at Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy. He's a big insider establishment, guy. He was a Senate counsel during the Obama administration. Now, he wrote a book called The Double Government, where he talks about this. I interviewed him. He didn't agree with my conclusions, but he understood them and he respected them. He didn't mean to say half the things he does say in this book. But he talks about how, starting in 1948, when President Harry Truman signed the National Security Act as an executive order, it created this massive deep state. I mean, you had National Security Council, the DSA, the CIA. Now you have added onto that all these other agencies. There's something like 50 agencies, including the new Homeland Security Department, and that they all operate with sovereign powers. They're not under the direct control. They get some government funding, but they all have black accounts.
Black budgets, yeah.
That's right. Just like what you were doing, Stan. I mean, they have private companies. They're intersected with international intelligence organizations like the MI5 and the Mossad and, all these other groups. And they're not particularly loyal to the United States. It's more this kind of international, kind of nebulous, informal global order. I'm sorry to have to say that. Now they call it the reset.
Yeah, that's why I keep saying we need a renewed church hearings in Congress. But the problem is
why they despise Donald Trump, by the way.
Well, there's a conflict of interest because a lot of those people know that these programs go on, but you know what I mean? They're going up against their own. It's a tough.
Oh, it's all very
protected. That's why Julian Assange is tortured the way he's tortured. That's why Edward Snowden.
They're all whistleblowers. And according to Michael Glennon in his book, Double Government, they have their people in all branches of government, in all of the major private sector, top 1% corporations. He says he names several Supreme Court justices that are involved, people on the Federal Reserve Board, people in Congress, people in all aspects of our government are a part of this thing. I mean, this sort of
the FISA court is one of the mechanisms they use. To go after whistleblowers, that court Well,
Well, that's why they went after, well, they didn't, but I mean, I think that certainly the same group of people went after Lieutenant General Michael Flynn because
sure.
he talked about whistleblowers. I mean, he was all over this. They had to
Well,
stop him.
in 2005, the DIA picked me up. Now, he was the former director of the Defense Intelligence Agency.
Yeah.
2005, I was down in Austin visiting my brother, who was a physician. He had a family practice, and I was on a military museum, on a military base. It was a museum. The DIA came in, these two guys in suits, hauled me outside, went through my van, interrogated me, wouldn't let me leave for a couple hours. Had to verify where I was staying. Then in 2016, the NSA had me down in Fort Meade for 2 hours, did the same thing to me. I mean, they don't let me alone.
Horrifying, yeah. I'm getting the heebie-jeebies just talking about this. I mean,
I've got bullet holes in my windows.
yeah, it's ugly. It's
Yeah. Whistleblower, like I say, Edward Snowden has it made compared to me.
yeah.
I'm stuck here sitting duck. I mean, he's got,
he's sitting
he's
there.
got a child. And,
He's under the protection of Putin. I mean,
well,
that's not good either. But
they, and 2 years ago, they filed stalking charges against me. My neighbors would stalk me. It's a big gang stalking program. That's one of the weapons they use against you.
talk a little bit about that. You have a lot of the documents you sent me. You go on about this as a tactic. What is this gang stalking?
Well, it's when people harass you everywhere you go. Complete strangers and neighbors and friends.
Well, what does that mean? What do they do?
Well, they follow you. They jump in front of you in line. They make gestures at your cars all the time. They let you know that you're being surveilled, illegally surveilled and watched. In fact, Julia McKinney, one of the whistleblowers, she was Army intelligence. And in 1990, she formed a group of former intelligence officers that wanted to come clean. And she says there's a national broadcast system that's being used on closed circuit TVs where they use for the stalking purposes, where they use it for entertainment or to show people who the targets are. And it's broadcast all over the country. I mean,
it's very much like
complicated. It's a complicated communication system is what it is.
Right. And they're constantly harassing you.
Harass you.
I mean, I had a situation, frankly, in my own life where this happened for a brief period of time when I was running for Congress against Barney Frank. I'm not going to talk about it because it's over. I mean, the election was over and it stopped, and I'm going to leave it there. But, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they interrupt everything. They hack every electronic device I have is hacked. I have to wipe my computers every couple of weeks. Every electronic account I have is hacked. I mean, I'm waiting for Walmart.
And basically, this is, in a sense, I think that this whole thing really accelerated under Obama because Obama was kind of a control freak. He liked to know what everybody was doing.
That administration was tough on whistleblowers.
Oh, yeah. He loved to eavesdrop. And even Angela Merkel complained. She brought a complaint up to the UN. He spied on friends and enemies. He just wanted to know what everybody was doing. It was kind of like this intense desire to control. That was an obsession of his, I think. And he used his office to do that. He was harassing organizations that were not of his political stripe by having the IRS harass them, from the Lois Lerner testimony, and other kind of dirty tricks. And I think that the result of that is that we have a much more enhanced technological tyranny today. We have the ability technologically of the government, and I don't mean formally, but more like kind of this informal collusion between various oligarchs in the government and monopolistic private entities like big tech and big drug pharma, or whoever, that are able to monitor people.
Well, see, that's the problem. The Amazon, the Googles of the world, they all have so much private information on everyone that, I mean, that's where the surveillance comes from.
Right.
I mean, Amazon's a big defense contractor, and very few people know that. Huge defense contractor.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that most of the money comes from renting out their cloud to the Defense Department.
Right.
That's why they were able. That's why they were able to take down Parler, because it was
Right.
competing with Twitter, and it was gaining on them very quickly. And they unfortunately were renting cloud space from Google and from I think they had some interface with Amazon. So all they had to do was pull the plug on them.
Yeah.
You know, now the lesson there is that Parler should have done what Gab has done, what Alex Jones did, and it's expensive and it takes time, but you have to set up your own cloud system. You have to set up your own servers, your own, infrastructure, and that way you have a certain amount of autonomy. And it does look to me like that's the way things are moving. People are beginning to almost establish an alternative means. I mean, there's like an alternative economy, an alternative culture that is developing, because ultimately we are still a free country, and people still, freedom is the natural state of being, and people are going to find a way. So they may take Parler down, but they can't. Parler's coming back now, I think, with its own. They learned their lesson. I mean, it unfortunately happened at a very difficult time. We don't want to talk about the election because I'll get banned. But let's just say that their shutdown was timed interestingly. Leave it at that.
Well, they make a concerted effort to dumb down society.
Yeah.
When they quiet whistleblowers down and people that talk against the government, they're dumbing down society is what they're doing, keeping people dumb. And one of the ways they do that is just the word conspiracy theory. All they have to do is associate your name with the word conspiracy theory, and it's that cancel culture
Right.
segment, of how they do it.
It's interesting that ironically, it was the deep state itself that pushed the biggest conspiracy theory of my lifetime, and which was that Donald Trump was spying for Russia, right?
Yeah, I know.
I mean, and they spent millions of dollars, and every day I would get these bulletins from the Boston Globe, oh, breaking story. You have a nervous breakdown looking at my smartphone. Oh, what is it? What is it? Stormy Daniels said this. It's like, in other words, it was this constant barrage of information to try to prove that Trump was colluding, is the word they use.
Well, Russia's an easy target. People like to use Russia. It's still Russia-phobia.
Yeah, I mean, it's still
McCarthyism.
It's the Red Scare of McCarthyism, except McCarthy was right. But putting that aside, I mean, there is a letter. I mean, I heard Rudolph Giuliani talk about this, that he has possession of a letter that was sent from Brennan, who was the head of the CIA at the time, formerly a supporter of Gus Hall, the Communist Party. He voted for him. And he actually sent a letter to Hillary Clinton saying that to get the attention off of the email scandal, where she was basically using her office to travel around the world and shake down world leaders for money, putting into the slush fund, the Clinton Foundation. The release of that bad information would be put aside, and the diversion would be that we're now going to make these claims that Donald Trump is spying for Russia. That's in writing. I mean, that's apparently a letter that Brennan sent to, I think probably Hillary. I don't know, but I mean, that's something that's now public record. I think that Judicial Watch got that released through Freedom of Information Act. But getting back to the subject, we don't want to get too diverted into politics here. Stan, so you started out as a whistleblower, and exactly what was it that you were blowing the whistle on?
Well, International Signal Control had a company that was an 8A set-aside company. It was a minority-owned firm. And Jim Guerin came from Lockheed Martin in the early 70s. He first worked for Hamilton Watch, which is right here 8 blocks from me, and they built fuses, military fuses for bombs. Well, then he built ISC. Well, ISC came to me through ChemCon, I thought, and wanted me to finance some of their operations. And I had their financial statements and things like that. And I got suspicious of the conversation. And I said, there's some fraud in some of these contracts. And right after the gentleman left, I locked my office up, changed my locks on my office, and fled down to my satellite office in Stone Harbor, New Jersey, where we were going to shoot the movie. And that's when people came after me and started the stalking, the harassment, the fabricated false arrests, and things like that. So what I did was I called some public officials up about what was going on. And leading up to that, there was a coup inside my company to steal my share of the company. And anyway, I ended up blowing the whistle on the fraud inside the contract. But what I found out a few years later is that the gentleman who came to see me was one of the 3 principals for International Signal and Control that was sued for the $1 billion fraud by Ferrani. So, but he didn't disclose that. So that's essentially what I blew the whistle on.
Right. And I think that it's safe to say that in the present atmosphere, unless you were blowing in the whistle on Donald Trump with his phone call to the Ukrainian president, in which case you can do it through third-hand information, which is not admissible in a courtroom, and you could have your identity protected.
Well, I tried to do all that in 2005. It didn't work.
Yeah, but the point is that if you're a real whistleblower and you actually are a witness to crime, it's a very scary time.
Well, very few whistleblowers get any type of protection. They get the opposite.
But you're supposed to. I mean, Congress.
Oh, I know the law. Retaliation.
Didn't it pass the Whistleblower Act, which protects whistleblowers?
In fact, I think the first act was 1986.
Yeah, I mean, we're supposed to protect whistleblowers because we want to have someone who's a firsthand witness to crime to expose it. Otherwise, we're going to have that's a natural protection and safeguard against corruption. Right. It's just that simple. I mean, we need whistleblowers. That's the job of, honest, conscientious people with a conscience to whistle for people on evil.
Right. You want to open debate in a true democracy. You can't be silencing people in a true democracy. Exactly. I guess that's the hypocrisy. We look at countries like Iran and China and North Korea that have these closed societies where they really have no openness, no transparency, and we're just as bad. In my mind,
I think we are. I think that we are becoming. I mean, I hope that I continue on this forum, and every day when I turn on my YouTube channel, I wonder if it's still going to be there, and I don't know. But as long as it is, I intend to do this program and continue daily to try to do what you're doing, Stan, which is blow the whistle on corruption.
Well, today, there's so much technology out there. Elon Musk has a company called Neuralink. And you know what Neuralink does?
What do they do?
He reverse engineered the CIA's chip for MK Ultra.
Oh my. What a thing. Yeah, that's incredible.
Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook. He had a company, a division called Building 8, and I applied for a position there that was trying to use synthetic telepathy for Facebook. In other words, you would use your mind to message people. Now, technology is possible. There's patents out there. I mean, they're mainstreaming these technologies. They're commercializing and mainstreaming all these technologies so that it gives a cover for the government programs that started the technologies. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, the government actually started all of the technologies of the internet.
Sure.
The
DARPA started the internet.
Yeah, it did.
In fact, in 1990, I helped pioneer the CD-ROM industry and did work with DARPA. Now, I didn't know who DARPA was back then.
Sure.
We helped build voice recognition systems. I did the CD-ROM manufacturing for the speech rapport that went out to all the scientists. I was exclusive.
It's brilliant science. It's extraordinary. Look, I'm doing this program. I'm some schlub sitting in a room in an apartment here, and I'm able to do live stream this program with you. And I don't know where you are. You're in Pennsylvania. I'm in Boston.
Thank you, sir.
Okay. There you go. And I'm in Boston, and we're able to be heard live on, I think it's about a dozen streams, and then it archives, and it goes into iHeartRadio and all these other venues. It's fantastic. So I admire the technology. The problem is, how do you kind of develop a certain level of proprietorship. I mean, it gets into the very basic principle that freedom is founded on and that America, we think, is founded on, which is private ownership, private property.
Here's one of the problems.
Yeah.
Computer hackers. There are these young kids that are 16, 18 years old. I bet you they can hack into some government agencies. I mean, that's the problem. Everything computerized is hackable.
Well, it is, but there is still growing technology that can prevent that. And I'll give the example. The state of Israel, in the last war they had with Hamas, there was over 1 million attempts to hack into their computer systems, all of which failed because they have built such an ironclad system of protection that they were able to fend that off. They're very good at that. They're very advanced in the area of computer science and data science and all the sciences.
Oh, yeah.
So I only mention that because it can be done. We can, in other words, there has to be a means by which we can own what we're doing online. Now, I know that we don't own Facebook. I get that. It's a private company and they can do whatever they want. I know they're using data to sell commercials, and that's how they make their money. That's their business model. If you look at it, like when I order a book from Amazon, all of a sudden I'm getting ads for books that are similar to that book. I get that. That's how ad agencies used to work before the internet. They do survey and they gather information. That's fine. But at the same time, there has to be a means by which we can maintain a certain level of ownership over our intellectual property, even if we are borrowing space from them.
Charles, I haven't owned my own mind since 2005. I mean, these satellites literally steal your mind.
How's that work?
What do you mean, how's it work?
I mean, you seem to me...
The NSA has... Edward Snowden disclosed the NSA program where they can use satellites to read every thought in your mind, in your head.
Now, is this to do with this 3D thing that I'm hearing about? This technology, this has
to do with remote neural monitoring.
Okay.
That's how they do it.
And what they can do is they can read your mind. They can't necessarily, and can they implant things into your mind?
You know what? I have lectures by people in DARPA that disclose how they can download a training session that might take you 2 months, and they can download it in your mind in a matter of seconds.
How can we stop it?
I don't know.
I know this sounds kind of hokey.
Oh, I know, but it's real. I know.
No, I'm not this. I'm saying, but I've seen ads for these hats.
Right, that's what they're using.
Well, they're made out of
silver
and supposed to protect your mind, your head.
Oh no, they don't.
That's garbage.
Faraday hats, Faraday cages. No, they don't.
They don't mess. You can't mess with that.
You can't.
So that short of some kind of hokey means to protect ourselves and to protect our brains and our minds, what can we do? How can we know this?
Church hearings is the only way.
The what?
Church hearings is the only way to start to address the
but that's not going to happen now.
Well,
they're incomplete. The Congress has been. I mean, it's unless the next election we can get back the Congress. I don't know, but
do you understand what telepathy is?
Please describe it. I mean, I kind of
telepathy.
Do.
Telepathy is like there's a mobile phone implanted in your brain that won't turn off. I have been talking to someone for 15 years, 24/7, never stop. We used to talk to each other in our sleep. They used to conference call me with 2 or 3 other people at the same time. Brain to computer interface, brain to brain interface.
And this is something that's not voluntary on your part?
Of course not.
Well, describe it, please.
I just did.
How does that actually happen? I mean, what do they come to you like? I've heard
microwaves.
Okay. What is the experience like? All of a sudden something flashes into your mind? I mean,
no, they started with me. They did it. They built it over about 9 months.
Well, I mean, I just think it's valuable right now in this short time we have today, and I'll have you back because I want to further develop this for you to describe what this actually is so that if we can know if this is ever happening to us, and then at least identify it as a first step towards
All
starting.
right. I'll give the best way I can describe it is if you close your eyes and I'll ask you to count to 10.
Yeah.
That's what it's like. Only instead of that, your mind saying 1, 2, 3, it's someone else's voice. Clear as day. That's what it's like.
Okay. I mean, I'm trying to think about if I've had any experiences like this. I know that I've at
Well, they
times.
could be reading your mind subliminally and you wouldn't know it.
Well, I
They
know
could,
that I've had some very intense, very vivid dreams,
well, they do a lot of dream manipulation.
and I have like arguments with Henry Kissinger or something. I don't know. I mean, I just have these
Yeah,
dreams
you
where I'm
could
like,
be. I mean, I don't know anything else about you, but it's worth researching.
yeah, no,
Listening to some of the lectures of some of the experts, you'll pick up a few things that you may find symptomatic of being a target. As far as the mind, technologies, the weapons, they use extremely low frequencies. If you remember Aaron Alexis, the Navy Yard shootings,
yes.
remember that? I was a member of Freedom from Covert Harassment Surveillance. Derek Robinson was an NSA whistleblower, and it was a human rights group. We were trying to get help in stopping these technologies. Well, Aaron sent Derek a suicide letter right before the killings down at the Navy Yard. Now, Aaron suffered from synthetic telepathy, and he thought the source of the weapons was the Navy Yard. But on his shotgun or rifle, he etched in ELF, extremely low frequencies, and that's what they use as far as the technologies. The microwaves use those frequencies to put voices in your head. They cause pain all over my body at will. I mean, they do all sorts of things.
Oh my God. Well, listen, Stan, I hope that you're going to weave this into a book and make it.
Oh, they won't let me do anything. You know what they did? They charged me with stalking my neighbors when they charged me, and they put me on probation for 15 years.
Oh my God. Well,
yeah.
Listen, Stan, let's stay in touch.
Yes.
This interview will be up on YouTube, live. I mean, it archives there immediately. And as I've told you, it goes on at least a dozen other sites. It's on Rumble and on Minds and on, all of the audio sites that I have. And, I hope that we can begin to shine a light on some of this stuff. And I hope that you come back from time to time and we can continue the conversation.
Yes, definitely. Just let me know, Charles. I appreciate it.
Now, Stan, is there any particular website you'd like to give out or information about yourself that you want people to know?
They shut down my websites. I have a Twitter page up where I post things, and I have a document that has like 98 videos, I think 20 audio recordings from 87 on. That more or less is all the evidence I use.
Can people hear that? Where is that available?
People can access. It's up on. I have it up on a Google Cloud, but you can access it on the top page of my Twitter account. It's under.
And you sent it to me through LinkedIn, so people can subscribe to you on LinkedIn, and you'll send it to them if they ask for it.
Yes.
All right, Stan Caterbone, I want to thank you for joining me today. Great pleasure. Great.
All right,
be well. Be careful. God bless.
You too. Thank you.
All right.